when it comes to the war in Ukraine, a lot of people get this wrong. You see, this is not something that started in 2022 or even in 2014 or 2009. This goes back 100 years, okay? Because we just won't leave the Russians alone. When they had the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, do you know what we did? We actually invaded Russia. I don't think many people know this, but England sent 70,000 troops to invade the Russians to punish them for having a Bolshevik revolution, right? And of course, the excuse at the time was, oh, we didn't want their supplies to fall into German hands. Mysteriously, even after the war ended in 1918, we were still attacking the Russians with chemical weapons. And the United States also invaded Russia under what's called the Expeditionary Force. I mean, I really don't care what you call it, right? We actually used chemical weapons against the Russians. It was called the M device, and Winston Churchill was a huge advocate for this. He just didn't give a goddamn. He absolutely wanted and did drop chemical weapons on civilians in Russia in the aftermath of World War I, so 1919. In World War II, when the Russians were the first to reach Berlin, when the Russians destroyed the German army, when the Russians inflicted 80% of German casualties, we again punished them for daring to be better than us because they reached the capital first. They were in Berlin first. And you had this, this immense power struggle that once again ensued. This country, this largest country on earth, has a better army than us that was actually the first to reach Berlin, the one that destroyed the Nazi war machine. And so even before World War II ended, you got General Patton on the US side, he hates the Russians and their guts. And Winston Churchill saying that the next war is going to be against the Russians. We're going to have to fight the Soviets next. And allying with them was just a temporary solution to kill the Nazis. But he said that Bolshevism should have been strangled in the cradle and so on. And it's not because, oh my God, the poor communists. It's because we've been attacking this country for 100 years and we just won't leave them alone. And so now you have the entire Cold War going on for 50 years where, in various theaters of war, mainly in Europe, but also in Afghanistan and in Africa and so on. And we just won't leave the Russians alone, right? And then even after the Russians lost the Cold War in the 1990s, NATO starts expanding. And of course, first we were busy bombing Iraq and giving the Iraqis trouble and actually, slightly before that, giving the Iraqis chemical weapons to use against Iran because we didn't like their revolution because they kicked us out. They kicked out our Shah that we installed and we lost all our oil in Iran. After that, we start splitting Yugoslavia, right? Because Yugoslavia is it's not Russian, but it's next in line. It's like a salami tactic, right? So it's the first one in line on the way to Russia. So we just keep, balkanizing the planet, just like we did 100 years earlier in the Middle East. We do the same thing again in Yugoslavia. We come in, we bomb the crap out of them, we split them up and carve them up into little pieces, we splinter them. And now you've got countries, bit by bit joining NATO, like Poland, for example, later on, which would have been unthinkable. These are Warsaw Pact countries. So we lied to the Russians to get them to accept German reunification. And then as soon as that happened, we turn around and did the exact thing, the very thing that we said we wouldn't do, which is expand NATO past Germany. And now we start surrounding Russia with more and more NATO countries. And then comes Ukraine, which is the last chip, right? It's the last thing before Russia. And you have 2009, so that's another color revolution. You have 2014 with the Maidan coup. 100 years of screwing with the Russians because we didn't like their Bolshevik revolution. We didn't like that they are a superpower. It's just disgusting imperialist rivalry, okay? And it's not about making the case for the Russians or feeling sorry for the Russians. It's about waking people up that this war in Ukraine now that's happening now, this is something that's been going on for 100 years. In the Russian psyche, they have, of course, Hitler in mind. They have the American and British invasion in mind. They also have Charles VII. They have Napoleon in mind. So it's just one European leader after the next, invading them, bombing them, attacking them, and just won't leave them the goddamn hell alone. So, sitting here and acting like, oh, it's nothing to do with NATO. It's just Ukraine, the poor victim. Ukraine is a victim. I'm not even telling the Ukrainians to stop resisting or fighting the Russians. I'm telling them to fight the Americans and Britain first, because NATO is the ones that screwed Ukraine more than anyone. NATO is the one that brought this war into Ukraine. It's a salami tactic. Russia is the only country that ever stood up to us. Russia is the only country that ever challenged the Western New World Order, or it's not very new, but the old and new Western World Order, and that's why we hate their guts. It's got nothing to do with Ukraine. Even in 2014, or it's been going on for 100 years, man. We hate them because they're a rival and because they made us look bad. That's it.